Hello. Here we will cover some of the basic taxonomy for the Eastern Hardwood Forest Ecosystem found in the United States. To begin, let's ask the question, why are the trees in this system called hardwoods? Whenever I ask this question in class, I always get a student raise their hand and say, because the wood is hard. How is that for an obvious answer? Then I ask, but why is the wood hard? The answer lies in the tissues that make up the wood. In particular, we're talking about the xylem tissues. Remember, xylem tissues are primarily responsible for transporting water. In softwoods, like pines, xylem is made completely of tracheids, tapered cells that are soft. While in hardwoods, the xylem is made of a mixture of tracheids and also vessel elements. Vessel elements are a little stronger and more tube-like. These vessel elements contribute to the wood being hard. Now, if we were to characterize all the hardwoods found in the eastern forests, they would have these characteristics. First, all of them are angiosperms. They are flowering trees. All of them produce fruits or nuts. Most of these trees have broad leaves. Most are deciduous, which means they lose their leaves when it gets cold. And in general, hardwoods grow a little bit slower than the softwoods like pine. The Eastern Hardwood Forest Ecosystem is not only one of the largest in the US, but one of the largest in the world. These forests cover more than 700 million acres in the US and are comprised of some of the most commercially important broadleaf species in the US. If you were to go to a furniture store to buy wood furniture, chances are you're selecting a wood type found in this system. Here is a map showing the range of the eastern hardwood forests in the US. All the areas in dark green are covered in hardwood forest. A majority of this forest system is along the Appalachian Mountains. If you've ever had the opportunity to hike the Appalachian Trail or to drive along the Smoky Mountain roads, you would see the hardwoods in all their beautiful glory, particularly in the fall. Let's explore some of the hardwood species found in this system. First up to bat, white ash. Pun intended, because white ash was commonly used for baseball bats at one time. Notice here the compound leaves in numbers of 3, 5, and 7. We refer to this as being compound odd pinnate. White ashes have dart-like winged fruit. These wings are to help with fruit dispersal. This is a classic American species that unfortunately as of late has been heavily threatened. The primary culprit to losses of ashes is this little critter here, the emerald ash borer. Up to 100 million trees have been killed so far by this insect. This beautiful yet deadly insect burrows into the phloem of the tree in order to lay eggs. This burrowing effectively cuts off all the phloem such that the tree can no longer transport sugar. This is referred to as girdling. Girdling leads to the slow death of a tree within a couple years. The next tree on our list are aspens. They can be identified by the spade-shaped leaves. You'll notice here the species name, tremuloides, is named because of the way the leaves shake in the wind. They essentially tremble, making a shh sound. Often on a windy day, you can spot where the aspens are by this sound. An interesting fact about aspens: the largest organisms in the world are aspen forests. if you were to visit an aspen forest in Colorado, you'll discover that all the trees are in fact connected. An entire forest is essentially one organism. All the individual trees are connected by the roots. So, although sequoias are known for being the largest individual trees, the aspen forest itself could qualify as the largest organism on Earth. Our next tree is basswood, Tilia americana. You can recognize this species by its heart-shaped leaves that are serrated along the leaf edges. Basswood has a very nice, clean wood, which is often used for crafting. The species gets its name from bast, which is derived from the inner bark, which is used to make rope and thread. Next, we have beech trees, also known as the mothers of the forest. Notice the leaves are serrated and that the nuts or fruits of the tree have these spikes along them. The leaves of this tree, when falling to the ground, generate a very nutrient-rich humus layer, a very organic, healthy layer, which can help support other plants in the forest. Similar to the beech are yellow birches. Notice that these leaves have pinnate venation and are also serrated. Native Americans often use these trees for canoes because their trunks grew nice and straight. This species has also been known as the mother tree because historically trees were planted at the White House to honor presidents' mothers. If you've ever had birch beer, it is made from extracts of birch roots. Next, we have Prunus serotina, or wild black cherry. These little fruits are drupes. They have a single pit. This species is very important for wildlife as the drupes support birds. Although the leaves have a classic shape, you can identify a cherry by the glossiness of the leaves. Or, if you happen to see one in the field, if you grab the leaf and crumble it, smell it, you'll smell a cherry smell. One of the two maples that I'll show you here, the red maple is recognized by its bright red leaves in the fall. Another way to recognize it is by the fact that the leaves have 3 distinct points, and the petioles tend to have a reddish color. This reddish color is often why people choose to plant their trees in the yard. Red maples, like all maples, produced a wing samara fruit. Red maples in particular have a double samara, a double-winged fruit. These winged fruits are used for dispersal. You may have recognized these falling little helicopters falling from trees. The other maple on our list is the sugar maple, Acer saccharum. Acer meaning maple, saccharum meaning sugar. If you look at the leaf, it's a little broader than the red maple was. It has more points too. These trees are notorious because they are used to make maple syrup. Every late winter or early spring, the xylem is tapped. The sap from these trees are collected in a bucket. A mature sugar maple can produce up to 12 gallons of sap a year. Once the sap has been collected, it's taken to a facility where it is heated and cooled in order to burn off some of the excess water. This heating is what causes the syrup to turn brown. It takes 30 gallons of sap to produce 1 gallon of syrup. The next species is another American classic, the American chestnut. Notice the leaves here have large serrated toothed edges. Just like its name, this tree produces nuts, chestnuts. Typically, it fruits in 3s. As you can see in the picture, there is a spiked fruit with 3 nuts on the inside. Yes, these are the nuts that are roasted at holiday times. I tried this once and failed miserably as the chestnuts exploded in my fire. Unfortunately, a large percentage of the American chestnuts in the US have been wiped out by a fungal disease called chestnut blight. This fungus enters the trees through wounds or holes that may have been caused by insects. Once in the tree, the fungus cuts off circulation to the trunk or the branch ahead of it. In the picture on the bottom right, you can see a branch whose circulation has been cut. Unfortunately, the only way to deal with chestnut blight is to cut the tree down so that the fungus cannot spread. The next tree on our list is the flowering dogwood. Now, this tree tends to grow a little smaller and is rarely part of the overtopping canopy. You may recognize it by its very showy white flowers. However, you are being fooled. Those white petals are not petals at all. They're modified leaves called bracts. Bracts function as petals, but they're not petals because they are not part of the flowers themselves. If you look closely and see the little green structures, those are the small flowers. Usually there are 4 bracts for every compound flower inflorescence. The flowering dogwood produces drupes at each flower. Flowering dogwoods are particularly important for this ecosystem because they are good calcium pumpers. For some reason, this species is very good at extracting calcium from the soil. This benefits the ecosystem because once the calcium is in its leaves and the leaves fall to the ground, that calcium now becomes part of the organic humus layer and can now support other organisms. The next tree, the tulip tree, also called the tulip poplar, is recognized by its bright, showy, tulip-like flowers. Its leaves are very distinct as well. Typically, each leaf has 4 points and is symmetrical. This is another tree that was used by the natives for canoes because of its tall, straight trunk. I discovered that this is one of the faster growing hardwood species, and it grows much taller than a lot of its peers. Next up, we have sweet gum. You can recognize this species by the leaves that are a 5-pointed star. You also may have seen their fruits all over the ground, this spiky little capsule. Notice here the genus Liquidambar. It's given this name because the liquid amber taken from the resins was often used for medicinal reasons. This resin was used to make balms, which were used to treat various muscle and bone disorders. However, there is little evidence that this balm actually works. Another American classic, the American elm. You can recognize it simply by the fact that the leaves are not symmetrical. One side is always a little bigger than the other. American elms produce a wafer-like fruit, as pictured here. They can also reproduce vegetatively through the root systems. Not to bring bad news again, but this is another species that has been heavily threatened. It is being threatened by something called the Dutch elm disease. This was a fungus that was attacking Dutch elms, which were introduced to the United States. This disease is caused by a fungus and spread by beetles. I've read reports that upwards of 90% of American elms were threatened or killed by this disease. Luckily, due to some genetic engineering, there are now some resistant varieties available for planting. Here's a picture demonstrating how the beetles burrow through the bark and into the wood. It's in these little cavities where the fungus can enter and cause the disease. Just like chestnut blight, the only way to prevent the spread of this disease is to unfortunately cut the trees down. Let's talk about 2 oak species. The first is red oak. It's called that because the leaves turn red, similar to the red maple. You'll notice that the leaves have a classic oak leaf shape. However, the lobes are toothed or pointy. Oaks produce acorns, which is a type of nut. This red oak is a little different than the white oak, whose lobes are rounded, but similarly, they also produce acorns. The next species on our list is the American sycamore. You may recognize these all over Monmouth County by the fact that they have a camouflage-looking bark. A unique characteristic of this species is that it produces the largest leaf of the eastern hardwoods. Pictured here is the fruit, which is a mass of seeds. This fruit starts hard, but as it decays, the seeds break apart and can be wind dispersed. Next up is the black walnut. The black walnut also has a compound leaf pictured here. Now you may have had walnuts. In the picture here you can see the green outer covering of the walnuts. You do not want to handle the walnuts with your bare hands though. Handling it will cause your skin to be dyed a dark color. This is where it gets its name, black walnut. It gets its scientific name from juglan, a chemical that the tree produces as a defense mechanism. This chemical acts as an herbicide and can kill its competition. You may recognize a black walnut in a forest because typically nothing is growing under it. One of my favorite trees in the Eastern Hardwood system are sassafras. First reason why I like them is because they have 3 different leaves. You have the classic leaf, you have the mitten leaf, and you have the 3-fingered leaf. This little tree produces a fruit that is a drupe with a single pit. It is also dioecious, which means you have male and female trees that are separate. The other reason why I like this tree is because of root beer. This is the tree that was used to make the original root beer. Roots and bark were extracted to make the drink. If you were to encounter a sassafras tree in the woods and pick at its bark, you would smell that familiar root beer smell. Unfortunately, root beer is no longer used to make root beer, as a chemical in it, safrole, is a carcinogen. Modern root beer flavoring is now made synthetically. What about what's growing on the forest floor? One of the most common shrubs you would see in an eastern forest is inkberry, Ilex glabra. Ilex, that's right, it is related to other hollies. This shrub is easy to identify because it has a yellow margin, and if you look closely at the leaf, there are 5 distinct teeth. What you may also see in the forest, hanging from the trees, are grapevines. The Concord grape originated in the US. A large quantity of them originated in New Jersey. These vines are deciduous, just like the trees, and shed their leaves in the fall. They also have annual growth. The Concord grape has been very important economically. First, it has been the source of grape juice. The Welch's Grape Juice Company originated in New Jersey when Welch decided to use grape juice as an alternative to wine at communion. The grape itself has never been used for wine, though, because it has a foxy taste. It's almost candy-like. It's too sweet. The wine industry does owe the Concord grape for saving it, though. The Concord grape is much more resistant to diseases than most wine grape varieties. It is for this reason that the Concord grape has been bred with other wine grape varieties to help their resistance. Some wine varieties of grape will have a Concord grape rootstock. Beyond the grapes themselves, the leaves have also had uses in regions such as the Mediterranean and Middle East. The leaves are pulled, pickled, and used to make treats like this, dolma, which is rice inside grape leaves that are cooked. This concludes some of the basic taxonomy of the Eastern Hardwood Forest Ecosystem. Thank you.